Good morning, everybody. I'm Hugo Stride, as Ian said, and I run Telemetricor. I've got 3 full-time employees, and we work in the Internet of Things where we're trying to get data and manage sensors in remote, difficult, or otherwise some hostile environments. And it's obviously quite a broad remit, that. What we've tried to do is create a general system that can be applied to a wide range of seemingly diverse problems. It's too much to try to cover in one go, but I thought I'd try to illustrate it by looking at our latest product, which we've called Telemetricor. And as you can see, that's how we came up with it. It's a remote area, intelligent, real-time, covert security system. So we have other products. We've spent quite a lot of time developing the fundamental software-hardware combination we've got for general applicability. And as it says, we contacted the Growth Hub sort of right at the end of December, really just before Christmas, for proper Growth Hub involvement from January this year. And we were sort of right in the middle of our last major technical challenge for product delivery, and the Growth Hub came in, and I hope as it will become clear, since the Growth Hub became involved, we've solved our last problems and we've really made tremendous progress. We've got 2 main products at the moment. One's Telemetricor, which is designed for remote area security. It applies to everyone from farms and estates through to military users. One of our latest military inquiries is Ugandan Special Forces for protecting their border with South Sudan to protect against incursions by the Lord's Resistance Army. So, but could equally apply to your farmer looking after his combine harvester. Our other product we call Telemetry Trace. This is a smartphone tracking system that can be used for everything from retail analytics through security to traffic management. And we've had a bunch of different clients for it. Our main one, the biggest name on there, is Toyota, who we look after out in Paris. And for their flagship showroom on the Champs-Elysees, we tell them how many people they convert into the store from the pavement outside, how long they spend in the store, whether they go in a store, what do they look at, and also what do their competition on the far side of the pavement, the Peugeots and Mercedes, see by way of traffic past them, to try to understand what they see in terms of whether they're paying the right rent, whether they're getting enough turnover to justify the expense of the showroom, all that sort of thing, and show how successful their exhibits are. The one I want to focus on is Telemetricor, to try to show the challenge we're trying to solve. This is a radio mesh networked, motion activated camera system. The idea being it operates in places where there's no mains power, where there's no cell phone signal typically, and the idea of the radio mesh networking is it's a fancy way of saying that the system is clever enough to solve the problems that installation poses if you're not familiar with using radio networks. So it can talk to everything else you put down, and it will find the quickest way back to a central receiver point from where it can upload that data, in this case an image, to a central server where we perform machine learning, image analytics in this case, to try to filter the data that we've extracted and establish before a human comes into contact with it whether there is some actionable content in the data collected. So for this specific system, it's all about trying to make sure that the first time you get an alert on your telephone, it's with a picture that has something actionable in it. Now, it might be the postman, or it might be a bug, or it might be an insurgent with a Kalashnikov, which I guess you see a lot of around here. But the idea is to try to make sure that that point of human interaction is once the whole decision-making process has been taken care of up to a sort of binary yes, no, do I need to do something or not? And it's a very simple yes, no answer to any question you might want to ask of the system. This is one of our customers. I'll let you read it if you can. He's Colonel Rob Andrews, former head of British counter-terrorism in East Africa. He's also a distributor for us now in Kenya and down that East African coast. He's got 8 cameras, he's had them for about 9 months. He's in Laikipia, where you would have read lots of people have been killed at the moment by some Buru tribesmen who, with the droughts and everything, need places for their cattle and this sort of thing. He was able in under an hour to set up a perimeter 3 kilometres away from his camp, which gives him about 7 minutes warning as soon as any potential threats walk onto his property or are approaching it. And he's already been able to nip several potentially quite serious incidents in the bud by having enough warning to mobilise his neighbours and chase these guys off. To talk specifically about the Growth Hub, as I said, when we got in touch, it was really end of December, started working from January. These are what I see as the primary benefits of the Growth Hub for us, and at that point we'd had some sales with our telemetry trace product, but we'd spent 2 years focused on developing Telemetricor, and as a small company with limited resources, that had been to the exclusion of all else, really. So we were very much in startup phase, trying to go from scratch right through to delivering a product to market. And the Growth Hub came in right at the point that we just about had a deliverable product. The first benefit I found certainly was in having a primary mentor in Ian, in having a growth champion, as I now understand they're called, was that here was someone clearly sane and intelligent who we'd spent 2 years working away, could come in, really understand the business and say, you've not wasted your time, what you've been working on is worth it, this sort of thing. And actually, having been mired in this stuff, that was a tremendous boost for us to know that it was sensible, the market we thought was there did appear to be there, and that this was a good idea and worth persevering with and spending more money on. Licensing and regulation support, so one of the big things we need in the short term is to get all our products CE marked. Ian brought with him one of his colleagues, Brian Watson, who was a sort of expert in this area, and he was able to give us a lot of very helpful advice on how to go about it, how to self-certify, how to get the information we needed to make sure we self-certified properly. And the benefit of that is we got a quote for £13,000 to have a company do it, and we're able to do it ourselves now, so the saving is tremendous. And in the meantime, we learned something useful as well. Momentum. This is the biggest thing I think the Growth Hub's given us as a startup, is real momentum. It isn't an exaggeration to say that since Ian became involved at the start of January, more or less every single day now we have had something positive, something to keep the day full, to work on every single day since the Growth Hub became involved, whether that's on the finance side, on the marketing side, on the sales side, whatever it may be. Every single day it's had some positive, however small, an inquiry, whatever it is. And that's continued for 6 months now. And previously, weeks would roll by where we were heads down in development and nothing was really happening. We were just trying to survive and trying to get something out that might work. And whilst we still had some of that ongoing this year, the Growth Hub's involvement has meant I can sort of look up and look around, and actually we've had tremendous opportunities and made tremendous progress. Very much thanks to Ian's involvement and his colleagues that he's been able to direct us to. Access to finance has been huge for us. It's a very expensive business we're in. I've self-funded it so far, but we're going through fundraising at the moment. We need to get to the next level. When Ian got involved in January, we were absolutely running on fumes. It had taken about 2 years longer than we were expecting to develop the product. It had been a really hard slog, spent a lot of money on it, and Ian came in and was able to send us to one of his colleagues, who was able to pull some strings, and within, I think, 2.5 weeks of the Growth Hub getting in touch, we were able to get a £25,000 loan approved from the startup loans companies, and Vicky, his colleague, was able to really push that through very, very quickly. So at a point where we just about maxed out our overdraft, suddenly we had £25,000 and we could see how we got through and to the point where we could actually make some money. So that was tremendous. Ian was also very helpful in helping me negotiate a £100,000 loan from one of the partners in listed the FSE group. As I said, we're going to turn that down and sell some equity because we need a bit more money than that. But we were able to get it at a point where the banks had said no, and we were just too risky as a small business startup, and it had seemed impossible that we'd get that kind of money. And the Growth Hub was instrumental in helping us get that. Key introduction. So Ian's been able to introduce us at the end of the Growth Hub to Oxford Innovation, Innovate to Succeed, who've taken up the thankless task of mentoring us and helping us along the road, and that's been tremendous, in particular with the eye to fundraising, and has also been able to introduce us to a partner company who are selling a non-competitive product to a very similar market, and we've been able to pool our resources and work together to actually dramatically increase the effectiveness and reach of our sales and marketing particularly, which has been really useful for us. Because everyone I employ is an engineer, so it's been great to have a bit of help on that front. Ongoing support. There's the ongoing support within the Growth Hub program, which means, for example, especially as a young guy, we had one of the major facilities management companies come down to see us about Telemetricor, what it might do for securing some of the premises they look after. We were all sat around my kitchen table, which certainly wasn't what they were used to, but having Ian there with his experience was, I think, reassuring for me and reassuring for them. And we had a very positive meeting on the back of that, and I feel that gave me an opportunity to be taken seriously that I might otherwise have struggled with. And then the other thing is, now that my official involvement with the Growth Hub is over, and he has given me much more time than he should have done incredibly generously, is that there are ongoing things from meetings like these where Ian's able to direct people who might be interesting to me in one form or another to me, and that's continued long after our official involvement is finished. I get calls, I would say, once a fortnight or so from Ian saying, I've met this person you should talk to, who might be interesting, and on the back of that we've got a tremendous, very useful guy who's expressing that he's very keen to invest in the company. So very helpful for us indeed. Sorry to have rambled on a bit. Are there any questions?
Question. So you get 16 hours from Ian.
Yeah.
How did that work? You spoke about doing day sections in 4-hour blocks. What did you do? How did you meet?
To be honest with you, I got all the support I could possibly have asked for. I know I got much more than 16 hours out of this. Ian came down to help with meetings, as I mentioned. He came down to see me and talk me through my strategy, and talked about and made the introductions, came with me to, or rather brought along the partners that he mentioned to meet with me, followed up with them, pressed them. One of the very helpful things Ian did was not only did he introduce people who could be helpful, he was also able to be much pushier with them than necessarily I could have been to deliver. And that meant we made really quick progress because Ian was able to be on top of it as well. And it's one of those things, I'm sure everyone understands, that you get all these introductions, it can be quite hard to stay on top of them and to chase, and you don't want to chase too soon, and but equally you've 1,000 other things add up and you realise you've forgotten to chase someone. One of the big benefits is once Ian's introduced someone, he spends the time making sure they deliver, tracking what they deliver, making sure that if they need to deliver something else, that's also delivered on. So I didn't have sort of day-long mentoring things. I had Ian whenever I needed him for, probably 5 or 6 months. So it was tremendous.
Thank you very much, Hugo. I'm very. I didn't write that script for him because I think it's very important that he has a chance. And thank you. You've been very, very generous in the comments you've made. There were 2 things that I think are relevant to everyone around the room that you touched on. If you don't mind, I'll just before we end or any questions, I'll just mention. One was There was a big cash crisis actually when we first came in, and that director's loan is actually available to everyone who's a director of business, £25,000 loan per director. So if you've got two, it's 50, you know, obviously you've got to be able to service it, but at the end of the day that is a route that most people don't know about. And the second thing was, although you were already starting to work on it, I think we kind of nudged you a little bit in terms of making sure that you reclaimed your tax
Yes, absolutely.
For innovation and for the tax credits. And actually that, between those two things alone, it put, I think it was
about £60,000.
About £60,000 into the HOD, right at the time when they needed it. And the last thing to mention, you did already allude to it, but one of, and this is where the circle squares, which is that one of our customers that I went to see that we probably dealt with about a year and a half ago, I wasn't involved with the Growth Hub at that time. Frankly, we hadn't delivered to them, and I think my predecessor had completely misread what they needed. I went and met them, found out what they did need, I delivered that to them, but at the same time I just said, he's a very successful guy. His business is making about 6 million profit a year, and he's doing very nicely, thank you very much. And I said, just out of interest, would you be interested in investing or as an investor for any of our customers? He said, absolutely. I put him in touch with Hugo. There's no guarantee that he will invest, but Hugo is looking to raise a considerable sum of money, and there is an ongoing advanced discussion from that individual who may well be one of the equity investors in that business. So, and again, that's not me, it's just putting people in touch with each other, which is what FSB really is all about.
So does this alter your job title to Dragon's Den?
I don't know about that really.
I think it makes him a pimp actually.
No,
that one I don't know. But Hugo, thank you very much for coming along this morning and also sharing that. I think it's much more interesting to hear what, you know, what people's clients are saying about it. So thank you very much. There's one last thing, and if I embarrassed Hugo, I apologise. That was Hugo's first presentation to people, and it didn't appear it to me, and I'm sure it didn't to you, and you did a really good job. So well done, and that's part and parcel of, you know, the service.
Thank you all very much for humouring me.
Really good. So thanks very much.